You're gonna have to say got it up there. You can just click got it. And then we're gonna record to the cloud and you're gonna say got it again. All right, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. It is another of our 50th anniversary of the Center for Wetlands. It's our Water, Wetlands, and Watershed Seminar. And we have another alumna from the center talking to us today. So we're very happy to have Shannon McMorrow. Shannon and I actually, I think, well, we had one in ecology with Tom Christman. It was my first semester as a graduate student, the first time I really learned about wetlands at all. And we had a great time in class. So it's really nice to have you back here. Shannon McMorrow has been working as an environmental consultant for WSP, which used to be called Wood, which used to be called AMEC Foster Wheeler, which used to be called AMEC, and before that it was MacTech. So that's how consulting works. But you've been there full time, right? So she's been working there for 15 years. She graduated from UF in 2008 with her master's in environmental engineering sciences here at the center. And while working at WSP, Shannon focused on the assessment of ecological integrity of natural and dispirited systems. She has gained extensive experience in the evaluation of wetlands, threatened and endangered species, and habitat assessments. And in doing so, worked closely with environmental organizations, state and local and federal partners as well. And performs taxonomic identification of macroinvertebrates to assess habitat and water quality. So trying to use critters to tell us how we're doing at managing the environment. She became a professional wetland scientist in 2018, and the floor is yours. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. That's pretty much the recap that I was going to say, but
Okay. Go. All right.
So as David said, I started off at MacTech, then became AMEC Foster Wheeler Wood, and WSP. Worked for the same company for 15 years, but we've changed names, we've been acquired, we merged with other companies, and been kind of an experience in meeting other colleagues from around the country, sometimes around the world. And even in Gainesville, we had 2 acquisitions of Boulder, which is another environmental, like ecological firm. That was a merge that happened with WSP, where now we've got more wetland scientists in Gainesville in the area. So we're working together and collaborating and good to get different perspectives from different scientists that are doing similar work to you. When I graduated, the market was not quite what it is now. It was really hard to find a job. Initially, I was struggling. I almost became a interpretive educator at Morningside Nature Center, but then I got the interview at MacTech, and I went into this interview thinking, yeah, I got this wetland. They want a wetland scientist, but they actually asked me to name a hydric soil. And I was like, I was able to do it. I felt like I nailed the interview and I got the job.
Just any hydric soil. Yeah.
I think that somebody may have fibbed a little on their resumes in the past, said that they had an understanding of hydric soils, and then came to the job and really couldn't do it. So they're like, what you do?
Yeah, right.
I was like, okay. So I was able to, I worked in the Gainesville office for about 5 years. Actually, my husband was doing his PhD here at Mark. And so then he got a job at the Southwest Florida Water Management District. So we moved to Brooksville for 5 years. And I was still able to continue working remotely. And I worked on call for a little while I had my children, and they were very flexible with me and allowed me to continue working, which was very nice. And then moved back up here, and here we are. And now we're several company names later. So I know when I went into consulting, I did not know what that job was going to entail. I knew a lot of wetland scientists, but most of them were in academia or in government positions. So I didn't get a full understanding of what consulting was going to be. So I'm going to speak a little bit about my career path, but then I'll dig into this one project that I really like. So on my first day on the job, I was sent to Orlando to do a wetland delineation. I was going to meet somebody who also knew how to do it, but first day on the job, like, all right, go to Orlando, do wetland delineation. I was doing that. I did stream condition index sampling, collecting bugs, benthic resource surveys, water quality sampling, jumped right into permitting. And then it was kind of like, hey, they need somebody in the Panhandle. Can you be there tomorrow? at that stage in my career and life, I was able to do that, and it was actually a lot of fun. I got to meet a lot of people in different offices and learn different things, learn about different ecosystems, and it was a lot of fun, a little stressful at times, but very rewarding. And then these are a few of my other favorite projects before I dig deeper, but I've been able to work on the Right Line Trains project, which is the passenger train from Orlando to Miami that they started the permitting process for that in 2012. And they just started operation like 2 weeks ago. So I've been working on that project for over a decade. We started with a lot of wetland delineations and threatened endangered species surveys. We did benthic resource surveys at the bridges to make sure there weren't any seagrasses. We did essential fish habitat assessments and biological assessments coordinated with the Army Corps of Engineers, Coast Guard, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, NOAA Fisheries. It was a wonderful experience just to meet all these different agency leads, and they're all trying to make sure that this high profile project, everybody's doing everything by the book and all the regulations are met. So that was a great experience. We actually relocated prickly apple cactus. They're a endemic species to an area in Indian River County that's next to Savannah Preserve State Park, and there's this part that the rail corridor goes through, so we just moved them from there onto the state lands property. Another one that was fun was the seagrass restoration with FWC in St. Andrews Bay. We did a donor site assessment for seagrasses. There was an area that had been being impacted by discharge from a chemical plant, and there was damaged seagrass area. But the chemical plant was taken offline and they were trying to restore it. So they needed donors to come in. So we did an assessment of the donor sites as well as the relocation site. And that was a fun project to work on. Worked with Mark Clark on some living shoreline projects in Cedar Key. Learned a lot from Mark on those. Then there's hurricanes come and you're like, what are you doing? A lot of adaptive management. And then about last year and the year before, I got to delineate all the wetlands on UF campus. It's further master drainage permit. They just need to map all the wetlands again, so they make sure they don't impact them with their development. So, in a nutshell, consulting is a lot of learning, especially early on in my career. I was constantly learning new things, learning new skills, being asked to figure it out. But I wasn't, just left to my own devices. I had mentors and people that helped me out, but you always kind of felt like you were never an expert at anything. As soon as you finally got a grasp on the one thing, they'd be like, okay, now go do this. So it's fun and it's exciting. I also get to work in a lot of partnerships. Like I said, we work with FWC, UF, and federal agencies as well as private companies. As we've grown, I've met new people and new colleagues, which is a wonderful experience. And as I've gotten older, I'm now mentoring more staff and teaching them how to do all the things. Some people like this more than I do with winning of work. It's like pursuing contracts and new projects. Sometimes those are exciting because you do a lot of research trying to figure out like what do they need, but figuring out solutions to your client's problem. So I'm going to do a quick plug for we are hiring. So we have offices throughout Florida. We have 2 offices in Haynesville because of the Boulder office and the Wood office merging. Eventually, hopefully, we'll get one office. But if you're interested, let me know. I have a QR code at the end. All right. So the project that I wanted to talk to you about today is the Wetland Reserve Program, and this is where we collaborate with, we work for NRCS. So the Wetland Reserve Program is a voluntary program where landowners, private landowners of agricultural lands that were previously or historically wetlands can apply to join this program, and NRCS will provide technical and financial assistance to restore the property to historic wetland conditions. NRCS reviews the applications and prioritizes the easements to protect and enhance specifically migratory birds and other wildlife habitat. But the overarching goal is to improve natural resources for Lake Okeechobee and Everglades restoration, support their goals. So a wetland reserve plan of operation is kind of the plan how to bring this property to restoration. And that's where we get hired on to develop this plan and work with NRCS from the assessment of the existing conditions to construction and through construction actually. And how we're going to improve wetland function and values and then maintain and manage the property through the easement, through the program. It also includes conservation practices and activities like prescribed burning, range planting, invasive species management to manage long term. So it begins with the field assessment and then through construction. The goals are to develop a restoration plan and return the easement to the extent practicable, sorry, to historic conditions. Most of these lands have been manipulated for agriculture. Primarily the ones that I've worked on have been for cattle ranch. So they've just been ditched and drained, and then there's cattle all over the property. Some of them are in more formal agricultural plants or citrus. But the cattle ones are generally the ones we've targeted. I think they're the easiest to remove the cattle, fill in the ditches, and restore hydrology. But we also have to consider the role of uplands if they've got, we don't want to drown the whole property, but keep some upland habitat and upland dependent species. What the constraints are that you can't have adverse impacts to offsite properties because you don't want to flood your neighbors, historic resources and cultural resources, and then protected species habitat. There's regulations on when you can do construction, if there's nesting birds that are protected in the area. So all those things are taken into account. So what is a WRPO? That's the Wetland Reserve Plan of Operation. That's that conservation plan that I was talking about. In the last decade, we've done about 10 WRPOs ranging in size from 600 acres to 26,000 acres. 26,000 acre one is the biggest one. Habitats are primarily freshwater marsh and slough wet prairie, but we also have bay swamps, cutthroat seeps, cypress swamps, and South Florida flatwoods. So when we receive a request to help with the WRPO, NRCS has already gone through these properties and prioritized this as a site that they want to restore. So what they initially do is they develop kind of an idea of what was historically there. So they start with a soil series. There's a link that you can take a soil series and look at what the ecological communities are. NRCS has developed this. And obviously, like in this one, there's multiple ecological communities that could be. So this isn't it's not the end all be all, but it's a good guide. And we look at the topographic maps, also LiDAR to look at the elevation changes and historic aerials. So then we develop kind of a target. This is the ecological communities we estimate were historically on the site, and this is what we want to achieve. But as you can see on this site, not actually there, right? I mean, this is obviously a lot of freshwater marsh, some pocket wetlands, and probably in the bigger sense, it's a slough wet prairie. I mean, the water flows through the landscape. So, but over here we've got, it's better if I point.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
Behind you there.
But the mouse will go to YouTube, so that's it. Yeah.
So there's a big ditch and berm up here preventing flow. There's ditches and berms throughout the site. Really, you've got just this remnant wetland here, some pockets. But the majority of the site is now in pasture. So we do our pre-restoration conditions. We see there's a few reservoirs on the site, large ditches. Even that wetland area that you can see in the aerial is still pasture land. It doesn't really have appropriate wetland vegetation, but it does have the it has hydric soils. It does get inundated, but it's not really a functioning wetland. A lot of improved pasture, a lot of invasive exotics. Cattle are observed throughout the site and feral pigs as well. But there are some ecological communities on there that are functioning. I mean, there's cabbage palm hammock, cypress swamp, some freshwater marsh. You got some little bit of ponded area in there. There's the seed sources there, right? One thing we generally see on these sites with the cypress swamps is even if they're there, they're kind of remnant. You don't see a lot of juvenile recruitment. So, you know, the hydrology is not great. So what we do is we go through and kind of assess these areas. On some sites, there are large areas that are in great condition. They don't really need to be touched. They've kind of not been altered as much. That's one we're working on right now, but this one is pretty much everywhere was altered. But assess the condition and see, you know, what the hydrology, what the invasive exotic species that need to be managed, and what we think we can achieve through restoration. So this is the pre-restoration map. Generally improved pasture, some wetland area, but it's improved pasture, a little bit of fresh water. So like 20% of the entire property displays wetland conditions, not great ones. So our goal is almost 100%. Also mapping of the invasive exotics. They are primarily on the berms. You get a lot of cogon grass and Brazilian pepper. In the ditches, you get torpedo grass, West Indian marsh grass, and then, you know, scattered throughout a lot of different invasive exotics that need to be managed prior to restoration. But like I said, there are these, they do provide a function. There are a lot of, we tend to see a lot of protected species utilizing these areas because they're in a complex of a large area that doesn't see a lot of people or disturb. I mean, you've got the ditching, but other than the cows, there's not much going on there. So, I mean, we've seen panthers, lots of migratory birds, even just, I mean, you'll have pockets of, you know, like a wetland like this. And then go at the right time, it'll be full of birds. So they've been selected because they are going to provide this wildlife habitat, and they are providing it, but we can definitely improve it.
Is that a burrowing owl? Or
That's the burrowing owl, yeah.
Have you seen them out there?
I didn't see that one.
Very cute.
This is the part that's not my area of expertise. I am an ecologist. This is where the engineers come in, so forgive me if I say things wrong. But the hydraulic and hydrologic simulation, basically it's use ICPR, which is the interconnected pond routing modeling system, to understand how the water moves on the site, right? So first, they need to establish the baseline condition and how the water is currently moving on the site, so we can alter it in a way to keep it on the site or have it move in a different way. So first is to establish that baseline condition and then validate that model to make sure that it is representative of existing conditions. Then add the restoration plan, several different iterations of that. See how you can get more water where, and then make sure that you're not having any offsite impacts, and then we can quantify the acreage. So use a digital elevation model. Primarily it's just from LiDAR, but then supplemented with survey data. And then the engineers go out and they locate all, or the survey and engineers will go out and measure pipes, ditches, weir structures, pumps. We need to understand if they are pumping from reservoir, what that schedule is. So that's all put into the system. And they run the simulation model, to determine water elevations during design storm events.
So Shannon, so this existing property has like 228 weirs, or is it in the model, or is that like on the ground now? Or if you don't know, that's fine. All of these structures are out there, probably if it's the existing condition.
Yes, I would assume so. There's a lot of, I mean, all these ditches have roads and then there's culverts to allow them to move through. They also, this one is like a giant berm here that has weirs. These are probably on each side of a ditch. So yeah, each of those points is, well, those are the nodes, but usually it's either a site where they measure the elevation or the structure.
Yeah.
I don't know what this means, but this is establishing the baseline, right? Okay, so they have to go to an offsite gauge station where they know what the water levels are on a period basis. Unfortunately, in these landscapes, they're generally pretty far away, so they're not completely accurate. And so that's why we have to do some validating and tweaking of the model to make sure that the conditions on site match what we're modeling. And this is the Hurricane Irma validation. So with all the water that came with Irma, it's the aerial imagery that came after that is a good representation of, you can see where the water is on an aerial. So if we run that storm event and in our model versus what is seen in these aerials, then you can say, yeah, we did a pretty good job. This is generally representative of what the hydrology on the site is. And this one they determined was generally okay. There was some area that was, then this one got, I think they went back in and did some tweaking because there's a large berm here that kind of holds back water, and it may have, we modeled it that it was inundated, but I guess it was not flooded.
So for folks who maybe can't read it, so like yellow means the model thought it was flooded, but it wasn't in real life. Blue means it was flooded in real life, but the model didn't see it. And green means success. There, yellow and blue makes green, right?
Yeah, the offsite is not in that's part of the model.
Right. So green is good.
So we did pretty good job.
Yeah.
So then we add in the restoration plan. All these lines that you probably can't see here, all the lines are land smoothing. That's where they just want to take the berms and fill in the ditches. The X's are removing all the pipes, all those 200 and whatever pipes over there. The green, those are reservoirs that were on site, deeper areas that they're going to fill in. Some water control structures. So these are kind of the outfalls. And then this one's an outfall. That one's set higher, kind of an emergency downstream, in case that we get high water level. They don't want to overtop their berm and have it collapse into there. So they have a water control structure for high water to get out of the site. So they put this into the model. And then run the model. So this is the mean annual 24-hour. So we're getting a lot more inundation with the proposed restoration. And let me tell you, this was not like the first time they ran it. Anyway, there's several iterations of what size structures to put in, what elevation to put the weirs at to get to this point. And it takes a long time to model. I don't know if you guys are modelers, but it takes several days just to run the model, and that's if it's successful. So we're seeing a lot more wetland area with the mean annual rain event. And then the continuous model is kind of basically you run it for a whole year. So it adds on to itself, not just one storm event. So we're seeing inundation throughout the site, which is very close to historic conditions, and a lot more than what we're seeing in the current condition. So 400% increase in wetland. Oh, and so the 20-day saturation was kind of a cutoff that we used to say that it would demonstrate wetland conditions. that if you got saturation at the surface for 20 days, then you're probably in a wetland condition. And then 180 days inundation is more, more water. So this is looking like a successful design. That's just compared to historic and existing, or historic and proposed. We're getting a lot closer to that historic condition with this design. Right, and then I mentioned the conservation practices. These are just like, these are NRCS guidance documents that have been vetted through the federal government to make sure that any practices that are implemented through this program are compliant with NEPA and are not causing adverse impact. National Environmental Policy Act, which I admit I thought was Protection Act, it's policy. But it's any federal action requires you to whether it's funded, permitted, or executed through the federal government, they need to make sure that they are in compliance with all of the federal regulations. So each department generally has a process that they go through where they check all the boxes to make sure that they're not going to be impacting another resource that the federal government is responsible for. So these documents are all vetted through the NEPA process to make sure that, and there's all caveats about, like I said, the protected species not burning during the breeding season, or and doing assessments prior to construction, things like that. So these are just some of them. It's a lot of documents, which what this does is this facilitates the permitting process as well. This program has its own, is in its own category for permitting because it's already gone through the process of making sure that the implementation of their projects is designed to not impact protected species or offsite flooding and other cultural resources. So as I said, that in the modeling there was a lot of tweaking, but then after we've approved this plan, then we get into refining the restoration plan and design, do additional survey in certain areas, geotechnical testing, the costing. NRCS comes up with a price. We go out there and say, it's going to cost a lot more than that. And so he started, always does, right? So you have to start tweaking things like, well, maybe we won't, maybe we don't need to plant initially. Maybe we'll see what plants come in and we'll recruit naturally. And if we have to do supplemental planning, we'll do that. So we kind of move that to the later phase and take some money off of the initial costing. Or rather than putting in a different water control structure that will work similarly, but maybe it's a little cheaper. Also, sometimes you'll find that, if we could just flood a little off here, we get a lot more wetland. And so NRCS is open to trying to establish agreements with adjacent property owners who might be willing to enter into this agreement and have a little bit more of their property flooded. And then the permitting process, which, like I said, generally these are pretty easy. Everybody wants to restore wetlands. So, and then this is not the same site that we were looking at because that one's still in design. Which actually I was just talking to my colleague who's looking at structures like this and trying to figure out, he's like, I don't have good survey. I need to get more survey, but this is the 26,000 acre property that's in construction right now. These are some water control structures and low water crossing. And then, so they've been in construction for a little bit over a year now, I think. I don't know how long it's been. I think it's
Where is it?
this one's, it's called Fish Eating Creek. So all of these are generally kind of north of Lake Okeechobee. But technically not supposed to tell you specific
Right.
locations.
It's in the basin, yeah.
All right, so Through the process of doing these, there are a lot of lesson learns and challenges that we have come up with. One is like I just said, the incomplete survey data. So when we initially start this, we rely heavily on the LiDAR. And then we have spot checks with the survey and in certain specific locations we get survey, but during the initial modeling, we're relying heavily on the LiDAR. And in certain cases, we've determined that it's not great. Not all the time. And especially if you have like a reservoir in there, the LiDAR doesn't go through the water. So you have to get bathymetric survey to really understand what's going on below the water. The boundary conditions, like I showed you, the gauge station was 5 miles away. Sometimes, you know, we have to estimate, we have to rely on observations by the property owners. So it's hard to confirm. Another thing that goes on with that is you're in a landscape of a lot of different agricultural properties that are also ditched and drained, and they also have pumps operating. So sometimes that, you know, that medium internal canal, the natural, like that flows to the natural system. If everybody's pumping, that water level is going to go further down than you might have modeled. Or if their water levels are high, you're not pumping. So also geotechnical investigations don't happen until once we've kind of gotten to the point where we have a good design, and then they're looking at berm structure, the berm integrity, and you find, well, it's not engineered. This is basically
Scoop.
scoop and drop and compact. So you might find that you have like a permeable layer in your berm that once you increase the water level, it might seep out. So you've got to reinforce that or monitor it. And so these are things. Oh, right now we're dealing with when there's a delineation of the easement. On one side of the property, it's on the north side of this main canal. And on the other side, it's on the interior. So if you need to control water on site, it's really hard when you only own half of the inch. And then more recently, NRCS has been concerned with holding too much water on site or ending up, you know, having too much or too little water. So they've been asking us to design a emergency outfall. So I've been working with Jessica Robbins and Scott Cupers at NRCS. I've had the privilege of working with them for over 10 years and on these projects, and I'm lucky to be able to work on them. Charlene Strolin, Grant Gatson, Tiffany Davies, and Max Wallace work on these projects with me. They're the ones who do all the, you know, the modeling stuff and the design. So just want to acknowledge them. And then, does anybody have any questions?
Really good. Thank you, Shannon. Well, I have a question just to start off. So how, or do you incorporate the landowner in the design process? And so I didn't really see their role here except as generous, you know, generously accepting the restoration. Yeah.
No, there are landowner preferences that are incorporated into the model. They generally want to continue to have cattle on the property in some areas, but they're willing to negotiate a lower head count on basically capacity that they negotiate with NRCS to continue doing that. Sometimes they want to make sure that they have access. And technically these are 30 years. So in the 30 years, they might take it back. Most of these property owners lease out. They're leasing out this land to for cattle. So they don't own the cattle that are on the property. Right. They just own the land, and then think they can get more money doing this than having cattle from people.
Do they express any kind of like preference, or just like the community, like the ecological community types, or like like, you know, beyond just wanting the operations element?
Not generous. It depends on the landowner. Some are more involved in the process and want to know everything that's going on. Some are kind of just like, yeah, come on. Yeah. So it depends. But more recently, like the one I'm working on right now, he wanted to maintain access. And then, but once we started talking about it, we were like, well, if we can just maintain this access, that might be more appropriate. And he was willing to work with us on that and said, yeah, as long as I can get to this location. And then the one I'm working on right now, it took them a long time to get us the boundary survey and it kept changing, which was really frustrating, but just because we couldn't move forward. But they had like 5 different property owners and each one wanted an out parcel where they're gonna have this 20 acres set aside. It's usually on the edge and we can work around it and that's fine, but they do usually generally keep some portion of the property outside of the easement.
So is there a financial advantage to doing this? I mean, why would a landowner do it?
Yes, there's a financial advantage.
They're paid?
I believe they do get paid, yes. So they NRCS purchases the easement to the property.
Okay.
And then they contribute funds for the restoration practices.
When you start like a new project on like any kind of public land that you guys have picked out, how long usually does it take, to kind of do the whole thing, or does it range?
So from when we get a contract to getting to kind of where I got to, not construction, but getting to design. I think in our contract, it says like 500 days, but we have not been able to maintain that schedule ever. No, why they keep giving us this 500-day schedule, because it's the modeling always takes longer, the negotiating always takes longer. But I would probably say 2 to 3 years. By the time it gets to construct, after permitting and construction, probably closer to 5 years.
You guys are typically working on like multiple sites at the same time, or just kind of focusing on?
We usually, right now, we're working on 2 sites. We're actually working on 3 sites. One's in construction, one's in design, and one's in modeling. But sometimes we'll just have one, sometimes we'll have 4 smaller ones. It'll depend on what projects we're offered, basically.
Do the landowners continue using the land for the 2 to 3 year design process and then?
Yes.
Okay.
So one site that I'm working on right now, it's primarily citrus, or it was historically in citrus, but now they are down to just like a few active citrus areas. And they are still operational right now during this design phase. And then they've got some cattle on the property.
Have you ever had projects that are coastal where parties may not agree with such?
We've not had any coastal ones, not for these projects.
So your firm is just one of many that are getting these kinds of, yeah, so like you're doing 2 right now, but in the state, do you know how many have been completed? Or I think in my first year I taught wetland restoration, we had 2 folks from NRCS. Sounds like they're not there anymore.
They might be.
Cornell and no, you looked me up, I can't remember, but anyway, so it's been going on for a while.
No. They have an office here in Gainesville. Jessica and Scott are down in the Okeechobee field office, so they're close to the action.
But there are many, like dozens and dozens of these going on, or do you know? Okay.
I'm not sure that
Okay, the number.
doesn't sound all right.
Okay. Any other questions for Shannon? YouTube is quiet, Zoom is quiet.
Can you pop up my
Slide. Yeah.
my slideshow? Sorry.
Might have to click on it.
Just if you have a class for hiring.
Do you hire at all levels, undergrad, master? Yeah.
I went to the career fair, so I was given all this information and they just had a book of just the entry level and internship positions that we were hiring for in the United States, but in Florida we had about a dozen entry level and internship positions.
Nice. All right. Well, let's give Shannon another round of applause.